Well, hey everybody, thanks for being here in our regularly scheduled meeting, which doesn't exist, and it's just me talking to the camera. I started my YouTube channel a few weeks ago, or sort of relaunched it, and of course, I immediately got really busy doing a bunch of things and did not make time to make many videos other than any videos other than the first two, which is how things go, I suppose. And it's also the weather has turned beautiful with some storms, but it's warmed up, and so I've been outside, going on bike rides and walking and doing all kinds of things, and and haven't read quite as much as usual because of that. Also some work stuff. So I guess didn't know it, but I picked the worst time possible to start making YouTube booktube videos. But anyway, it's Friday, and so I want to do a Friday reads. A few things to share with you today. A book I finished, a book I bought, a couple books I'm reading, and another book that I'm getting ready to start reading. So let's start with this book that I just finished reading, which I talked some about in my last Friday reads, I think, which is called The Bookshop by Evan Friss, A History of the American Bookstore. I don't know if it will show you a clear cover or not. But yeah, I enjoyed this. I'm probably not going to make a whole separate video on it or anything, but it was one of those kind of, easy reading nonfiction books where, the stakes don't ever really get that high, but it's about, a fun topic for a book loving person. And it's the book set up where there's I don't know, 10 or so chapters, 13 chapters, each one focused on a different bookstore or maybe group of bookstores, and then these little interstitial 1-page, 2-page sort of pieces in between each section that are focused on different characters, maybe that specific characters at different bookstores. The author never really talks about how he, it seems a little random, the bookstores that he chooses to write about or that he visits, and maybe that's just my own neuroses kind of talking, but I would have liked to know what, maybe I would have preferred a little more explanation at the beginning about how and why he chose these bookstores, and just a little more. I guess I wish it would have gone a little more in one of two ways. Either one, been more of a sort of systematic approach to covering different bookstores in a little more scholarly way, or been a little more personal and a little more of a memoir type of book. But as it is, it's kind of in the middle of both. It's kind of idiosyncratic, and just hops around. And so, as I was saying, it's fun. It's a fun little sort of journey through American bookstores, but it never, felt that urgent or anything like that. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, depending on what you're looking for at a particular time. I think my favorite couple of chapters may have been the first two. Maybe that's just because I was beginning the book, but the first chapter was about Benjamin Franklin. The second chapter was about the old corner bookshop in Boston, and I really enjoyed getting a sense of like early American bookselling and what that was like. There was also a chapter about Parnassus on wheels, and mobile bookstores. That was kind of cool. There's a new mobile bookstore in my area here in Southeast Kentucky. and the name escapes me right now, but I shopped there once and it was a cool experience. It was like a little pull behind camper, really cute vintage camper. And it was fun to go inside there and shop around on these bookshelves, But anyway, there was a chapter about the Gotham Book Mart and the Strand, so kind of the New York bookstores, and there also the sidewalk bookstores. Chapter on the sidewalk bookstores in New York City too. And I bought this at the Strand when I was there visiting, and it was signed at the Strand by the author, so that was kind of cool. And I did enjoy those chapters as well. Then there was a section on like different political, I guess is the right word, bookstore movements or something. I don't know the exact word I'm looking for there. There's a chapter on called the Aryan Bookstore about basically fascist bookstores in pre-World War II, where there were these German, very fascist, pro-Hitler, anti-Semitic bookstores, and then also in the same chapter talked about communist bookstores, and so it was kind of a chapter about radical bookstores. I'm not sure how great a job it did at sort of differentiating between different types of radicalism and what that, like I said, the stakes never got high enough, maybe, or there wasn't, maybe the point was not super clear, other than just kind of gathering these different types of bookstores into one chapter and talking about them all. Anyway, and then a chapter called Oscar Wilde, about the Oscar Wilde bookstore, about gay and lesbian LGBTQ bookstores, their sort of start up till now. And then a chapter called Drum and Spear, which is about black bookstores. And so that was interesting, 3 different chapters. But again, everything's just kind of at random. And then a couple chapters, one about Barnes and Noble and one about Amazon Books, that I did find really interesting too, kind of chronicling how Barnes and Noble, pushed out the independent and the bookstore, and then how Amazon began to push out Barnes and Noble. And we're kind of, if you're following any of the book-selling world right now, we're kind of in this moment where it looks as if maybe the downfall of the independent bookstore has been overhyped, and that's kind of the final chapters about it's titled Parnassus, and about Ann Patchett's bookstore in Nashville, which I had been to when I lived around Nashville. And so anyway, kind of left on a bit of a high note, but I was continually sort of like really good nonfiction pushes you somewhere, even at the end of a chapter, if there are these discrete kind of chapters about different topics. And I felt like the conclusions were not, really, it wasn't clear what conclusion we arrived at. We just sort of were given some facts and anecdotes and stories, which were fun and entertaining, and engaging to some degree, but it did, I recommend this, but not, I don't give it 5 stars, in other words. It was good, but not great. But anyway, a fun read over the last few weeks since I bought it. Read it sort of in pieces, chapter here and there, which it's good for that. Okay. Next, I want to talk about a book that I just bought and shout out a bookstore. A bookstore called Poor Richard's Books in Frankfort, Kentucky, which I just visited for the last few days with my partner. We really enjoyed the town of Frankfort. If you're ever passing through, it really punches above its weight in terms of history and things to do, and pretty area too on the Kentucky River. But the Poor Richard's Books there, the downstairs and I should have filmed stuff, but I didn't. The downstairs is sort of like your typical bookstore to some degree. It's new and used, mostly new books, some used, with a Kentucky author, a focus on Kentucky authors. And then there's a press called Larkspur Press, which at some point I should actually do a video about Larkspur Press because it's a Kentucky press. They publish these really a lot of sort of small print runs of books by mostly, if not exclusively, Kentucky authors. And they're these beautiful little books, usually of poetry or essays, not nonfiction, but some fiction as well. I think, with a sort of a focus on what you might call nature writing or writing that's kind of focused on the interaction between the human and the non-human world, and they're just beautiful books. And so they've got the biggest selection of those that I've seen in a bookstore. But otherwise, sort of a typical bookstore. But then you go upstairs to the second level, and that's when the bookstore really becomes amazing to me. The second floor is sort of like going up into your grandpa's attic, which is also a library, but no one's been in there for a decade. It's just, there's some lights, but I use my phone flashlight some of the time when I'm looking at some books, just full of old used books, some really old, and some not quite as old, but all used books, everything from paperbacks to leather-bound volumes to, sort of travel guides, medical textbooks, novels, everything is there. And it's all used, and it's all cheap, and it's organized, but sort of barely. It's a very fun choose your own adventure sort of thing. And so I just bought one book while I was there because I was trying to limit myself, and it for monetary reasons as well as time reasons. But so I bought this book there that I had never heard of. I'd never heard of the author. Y'all may. It's called The Lawrenceville Stories, and this is a book that first came out. I'm not even sure when exactly it first came out, but early. Okay, it looks like late 60s. 1967 is what this says. The cover page here. I think maybe this is a collection of 2 books, though, and I think one of them came out a little earlier. But then this is a reprint from 1987, around the time that these stories were made into a TV series, an American Playhouse presentation, as you can see on the back. And it's by the author is Owen Johnson, and these seem to be a sort of boys' preparatory school is the setting, and these are comic stories about a protagonist who is sort of a clever mischief maker, and they just seem really fun, and I'm excited to I read the first half of the first story, and it just, not only is what's happening funny and the pranks that are happening, but the narrator's voice, sort of the authorial voice, is just dripping with irony, and just so fun. The way that the protagonist, who's known as Hickey, who's called Hickey, that's his nickname. His last name is Hicks. The way that he's just appalled that a teacher would, try and get him to behave. Basically, it's like a breach of the social contract at school or something. Anyway, really seems really fun. I'm looking forward to starting to read through these stories. Let me know if you've ever heard of these or maybe seen the PBS, I think, TV series that is based on this book, which again happened in the 80s, was made in the 80s. So let me know if you've ever seen that, or if you've read this. It was just completely new to me. There's a shout out somewhere, a blurb from Booth Tarkington, about how everyone was reading these, and a certain group of people at least was reading these at a certain time. And anyway, they seem like to be one of those sort of forgotten classics. So really excited about that, and shout out to Poor Richard's Books in Frankfort, Kentucky. You should go sometime if you're ever passing through. It was a really fun store. Okay, 2 books that I'm currently reading. First, I'm going to talk about Deep River by Karl Marlantes. Marlantes, I think that's how you say his name. I'm getting close to being finished with this book, just a couple hundred pages left. It's a big chunk of a historical novel. Hey, Rocky, you can come on up. You can come on up. Yeah, there you go. It's a big chunk of a historical novel set in the Pacific Northwest, particularly on the Columbia River, in the very early 20th century. Did I talk about this my last Friday reads? I was getting ready to read it. I've wanted to read it for a long time. I don't know why. It's just one of those books that the content, subject matter was like, I really think I'll like that. And I haven't focused on historical fiction a lot recently, and in my reading, and I when I kept thinking of this book, it just seemed like if I'm going to read a historical novel, this seems like the book to dive into. And so I've really enjoyed this book. However, I've been trying to think about why, sort of thinking about what I do like and what I don't like about it. What I like about it is it's like reading, a work of history with, with more story, with characters that I can, it's on the micro level. It's sort of that's what I guess historical fiction does to some degree. It takes history, and I don't know if it makes it more accessible, but it makes it more human, maybe a little bit. And so it's about loggers. It's about these Finnish loggers who move over from Finland, escaping a variety of issues and problems and bad conditions over there. And they move to the Pacific Northwest. They begin logging. There's different characters. It's a family, brothers and sisters, 2 brothers and a sister. And so they sort of go in little different directions. The sister is a communist, at different times communist, socialist, generally labor organizer, who gets involved with the Wobblies, and so you've got that sort of thread going. One of the oldest brother, starts his own sawmill, and the youngest brother is just a logger, and then gets into various things. But they're all sort of making their way in the timber industry in early 20th century Pacific Northwest. And there's lots of, World War I is happening where I am now. They've been in America for a little over a decade, been in the U.S. for a little over a decade. World War I is happening, the timber, and that's causing a timber boom to build airplanes, which you don't think about them being made of wood, but back then. So building airplanes, building barracks, there's this, the market has just gone wild, but it looks like it's going to contract again towards the end of the war. And so you've got all these different factions, the timber, I want to say timber barons, but they're not all timber barons. I mean, you've got the owners of the logging companies, from small to really large. And you've got the owners of the sawmills, which are different, and you've got the fishing boats there, and you've got the unions, different unions, some of which are really opposed to each other in the methods that they use. You have the socialist and the communist opposed to each other. You've got all these different factions, and it's kind of a jockeying to see who's going to come out on top, and then and where I am right now, you're starting to see the rise of corporations in this world, where we're moving from different people owning one sawmill to now there's a corporation that owns 4 sawmills and has just bought up a 5th. So it's doing a great job of. I mean, I feel like if I wanted to know about Finnish loggers and sawmill workers in early 20th century Washington and Oregon, it was with a focus on labor politics, you could not do any better than to read this novel. I mean, that's all there, and it's all done really well. However, sort of the depth of really good literary fiction is missing for me, and that's sort of always the thing, I'm always looking for like the perfect mix of the two, and it's tough to find that. And I don't always want that, I guess. Sometimes just kind of straight up historical fiction that doesn't get too bogged down with language or a literary sense is good. But as someone who really kind of feels spiritually, intellectually nourished by that, it's tough to read 700 pages of a book and sort of feel like that part is missing. The characters, they change, and they go through different things, but there's not a real sense that there's a depth. I mean, they sort of, like, all the boxes are checked. They have, meltdowns. They have different dreams and desires, and they're complex characters in ways. But there's not that sense of depth. Really, it feels like they're placeholders that the author can talk about history. It seems to me that the author is more interested in the history of the area than in these individual characters. The characters feel a little transparent. That said, this is a really good book, and I do suggest people read it if the content seems interesting to you. But I'll sort of contrast it with another book I'm reading, Between the Woods and the Water, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. I read A Time of Gifts. I thought I had read it a couple of years ago, and I looked back, and I read A Time of Gifts in 2019, I believe, or maybe 2020. Anyway, over 5 years or more ago. And so it had been a lot longer than I had thought before I got to book 2 of the trilogy. And, this is by Patrick Leigh Fermor. And if you don't know what this trilogy, which is sort of unfinished, but the 3rd book was published, what's happening, he's walking from the Hook of Holland, in the Netherlands, to all the Constantinople. And the first book leaves off with him crossing the Danube, getting ready to enter Hungary from Slovakia. And then this book picks up there. And so I'm just a little ways into it. I'm very slowly working through this book. It's sort of a travel narrative, but it's in these kind of discrete sections, kind of chapters with little sections that make up the chapters. And it's I felt this way about the first book, and I'm feeling it about the second. It's just one of the greatest books I've ever read, one of the greatest reading experiences I've ever had. Every page is just so full of beautiful writing, and not only about the not only about the natural world which he's walking through in the 1930s, as Europe is changing, but um, also about history, politics, art, architecture, all sorts of cultural things. It's it feels like it was written just for me. A lot of other people feel that way, and I'm going to read you a couple of sections, I think, just to sort of let you know the two sort of ways that this book, sort of the two poles between which it oscillates, and the sort of depth that is there, the sort of intellectual depth that's here that I feel like is missing a bit from Deep River, and I would love something that sort of mixes the two. So I really would like some recommendations for your favorite historical fiction that has a really deep literary sense to it. But I'm going to read two sections, or part of two sections. First, this is sort of the height of him writing about nature, and he's walking into Hungary at this time. So he picks up: from the path that climbed along the edge of the forest, backward glances revealed swamps and trees and a waste of tall rushes, and the great river loosely dividing and joining again round a chain of islands. I could see the waterfowl rocketing up, circling like showers of motes, and stippling the lagoon with innumerable splashes when they settled again. Then high ground put them out of sight. Foothills rose steeply on the other side. Lesser hills overlapped each other downstream, and the fleece of the treetops gave way to cliffs of limestone and porphyry. Where they converged, the green river ran fast and deep. Just beautiful, just gorgeous writing about nature. I mean, sort of, as good as it gets. And then just a few pages later, he's continuing to walk down this track, and he comes upon the ruins of this castle. And we go into this aside about the Magyars, which I think is how you pronounce that word. There's going to be probably a lot of words through here I do not pronounce correctly, because I have no idea how to pronounce Hungarian words. The Magyars first settled in Central Europe at the end. So he's talking about this castle. He says, I had been told about this castle. The Magyars first settled in Central Europe at the end of the 9th century as fierce pagan invaders. 400 years later, when they had been respectable for at least 3, their country had become a great Christian kingdom, and the Arpads, who ruled over it, by now an ancient dynasty of warrior kings, legislators, crusaders, and saints, were allied to most of the great houses of Christendom. King Bela IV, brother of Saint Elizabeth, was the ablest of them. He lived in turbulent times. In recent decades, Genghis Khan and his descendants had laid Asia waste from the China Sea to the Ukraine, and in the spring of 1241, news of great danger reached Hungary. After burning Kiev, Genghis Khan's grandson Batu was heading for the eastern passes. Bela tried to prepare defenses, but the Mongols' onslaught through the Carpathians was so fast that they surprised and routed the sleepy Magyar nobles, and then ranged over the Great Plain, emptying and burning the towns all through the summer. Promising the peasants their lives if they brought in the harvest, they slaughtered them in the autumn when it was safely threshed. Then, crossing the frozen river on Christmas Day, they set about the western regions. And it continues. But there's just this, this being really present, but then also this book was written decades after this actual trip by the author. So there's the sense of being really present in nature, in the world, I should say, and writing about, these non-human scenes, that are just gorgeous, and writing about them in such a present way. and then all of a sudden we pull it out, or pulled out of the present, and just the lens becomes, huge. It goes from being very small to huge about the history of of the entire country in the 1200s, something that is just always new to me, and so the writing is just so rich and so densely packed with with exactly what I want from a book. And I'm 30 pages in and just could not be enjoying it anymore. So if you haven't read these books, you should start with the first one, which is called A Time of Gifts, and then don't wait 5 years to read the next one. It's just do it. Although it has been nice to sort of know that I've planned on reading this for years, and to just keep sort of waiting to savor the moment. So historical fiction and history memoir is part of what I'm reading right now. And then I'm getting ready I'll finish here with what I'm getting ready to read. First Love by Ivan Turgenev. I'm not sure if that's how you use Turgenev or Turgenev. I haven't read anything by him before. I haven't read that much by Russian authors in general, mostly Dostoevsky. But I'm reading this, just the title novella, First Love, for the Moose and the Gripes novella book club, which is getting ready to happen. I think the first discussion of maybe the first few sections of this novella is going to happen April 6th or 9th or something. You can tell details aren't maybe my strong suit. But that's happening on Discord, by the way. So if you know that podcast or Trevor's blog or something, it's something you still would theoretically have time to get into. There's going to be 2 more novellas read over the course of the year too. I think Giovanni's Room maybe next by James Baldwin, and then The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Sparks. So I'm going to read all 3 of those with the Moose and the Gripes book club. But anyway, I'm getting ready to start this. I have no idea what it's about other than just having read the first couple paragraphs, and it seems like maybe there's going to be people telling stories of their first love. I don't know. That's what it seems like in the first few paragraphs. So really excited for that. If you're also reading this for that book club, let me know. Would love to connect on YouTube as well. Anyhow, thanks for watching and listening to me talk about these books. Thanks for if you've subscribed. I'm so surprised that there actually were a few people that watched my newbie tag and subscribed. So a big thanks to you all for being here. Like I said, I'm treating this as a journal more than anything, but it's really nice that when people support and watch and comment and make it sort of like a pseudo community of sorts. So thanks for being here, and if you subscribed and stuck around and watched this video, that's sort of mind-blowing to me, and I really appreciate it. But thanks a lot, everyone, and I will see you next time.